Good evening, welcome back to our weekly question and answer series for Anash.org. Question: if I pay a magachir to give a shir in a shul, can that be considered maser? Yes, if when you started to give maser, you made that nai, that you don't want to give it only for poor people, and you could give it for anything which is kedusha, tzedakah, etc. As I always say for people, they should make this kind of nai, and then you could use it for all kind of other things. Yes, paying for a magachir in a shul, that's called harbotzas hatoira, and you could use it from Moas Maser. Question: when going to the mikvah on Shabbos, we are supposed to be careful not to do schita on our hair. How is one to avoid that? What is considered schita on the hair? So you bring up a very interesting question. Yes, when we go to mikvah on Shabbos, one of the things which you have to be very careful is the problem of schita. You shouldn't squeeze out the water from your hair. Now, Minat Torah, there is no schita on hair. Schita is only when something gets soaked in to a towel or something. But if it is only between hairs, it doesn't get soaked into the hair, is Minat Torah, it's not schita. But with Rabbanan, it is a problem of schita, and schita besaras is mid Rabbanan. So the first thing, what do we need to do? We have to make sure that you shouldn't squeeze out the water from your payas and from your beard. Some people tie their beards and make it shorter and with a clip. So you have to make sure it should be dry, and if it's wet, it's still wet, then when you tie it, you will squeeze out water from the hair, and that's a problem of schita, besaras, at least with Rabbanan. Regarding hair of the body, the K'tzos HaShelach in the Simon Kif Lamed Gimel Sifkut Neches writes that there isn't any schita only on places which it is a lot of hair. So if you have hair on your hand or on your eyelash, all these things, there's no schita. But hair which you have on your head, that's already also a problem. So how could you avoid schita on the head? Now, some poskim say that if you dry it with a towel, it's not a problem of schita besaras, because it goes from the hair to the towel and we don't see it. Because schita, there's two problems. One problem is libn, cleaning. You clean when you have a towel and you squeeze the water, so you clean it, get washed. That's libn. And the second problem is dosh, taking out the water from where it was soaked in. So libn, there is, by human body, there's no such thing as libn. So there's not a problem of schita, which is libn. But you have the problem of schita, which is dosh. So Reb Shlomo Zalman writes, it's brought down in Shmir Shabbos Kechus Peirig Yidalet Tehura Samach Dalet, that when it goes from the hair into the towel and it doesn't get squeezed out, the water should stay on its own, it's not a problem. And the truth is, this Nekida writes already, the Bachu Sharuf, the Aishel Avruam, which was 200 years ago, Talmud of Badit Shuvaruf, and the end of Simas Shin Chov, brings it down also this svara that since it's only schita b'sar, it's only a drabonan, and if it's not being squeezed out directly, it should come out from the hair. Like I mentioned before, when you tie up your beard, then you squeeze it and you take it out. But if it doesn't come out, the water doesn't stay for itself, it's not a problem. And this is also how the Menich Sahaver paskins, and some other poskim paskin also, that anytime when you use a towel on your hair, it's not a problem. But a lot of other poskim do not agree with that, and they say that it is a problem, and there is chita even if you squeeze with a towel on your hair. So therefore, when it comes to Shabbos in the morning and you want to dry your hair, you could only use your towel on your hair slightly, and should not squeeze it. So just to sum up, when it comes to your beard or payas, you cannot turn it and tie it up, because then for sure water will come out, and that's a problem of schite besaras. You have to wait it should dry out. When it comes to hair of your head, some poskim say if you use a towel, there's not a problem of schite, and other poskim say there is a problem, so therefore it is kedai that you should wipe your head slightly and not squeeze on it. Hair from or other places in the body, the Ketzoyes Shulchan writes, it's not a problem of schite besaras. Question. I was asked by a shlucha, since her daughter from the Yaldei HaShluchas got a kinnis t-shirt that was a total red one, can she wear it? Now, in Shulchan Aruch Yeredeya Simekif Ayin Ha Ches Sif Aleph, the Remu writes that you cannot go b'chikas hagoyim. Kegon, for instance, you cannot wear red clothing, because that's chikas hagoyim, and it's malbish of pritzes. And the Shach Sifkut Gimel brings down from Shal Shivas Marik, one of the end of the Rishonim times, Simon Paiches as Gimel, writes, red clothing, ein derech hatzniim, they should go with red clothing. A tznias, a Jewish lady which is tzenua, do not go with red clothing. Black clothing, that's the way of tznias and achnoah. As we see, the Gemara says if a person has a Yetzer Hara, Yitzrim is Gabarul, if he should wear black clothing, because black clothing makes a person behachnoah. So therefore it is tznias dik, but you should not wear red clothing, because that's against tznias. And he finishes a very interesting thing which he writes. Mesoyres b'yedayni. We have a Kabbalah. We have, doires. Generations to come ahead, we know lahakpit alavishas udam limnayamayni. Jewish people, all the generations were makpid not to wear red clothing. And the Gemara writes in Masechtes Bruchas, Daf Chof Amud Aleph, that Rav Ada, one of the Maroim, saw a lady wearing a red scarf, and he tore her off from her because it was pritzesdik. Then he realized it was a goy and had to pay 400 ziz. But at least we see that wearing red clothing is a pritzes, and it's also to wear as the Ramu states it. So first of all, we have to know, tznius women, Jewish women, Ehrlich women do not wear any clothing which is red. So over here, when she got a t-shirt which was totally red, I told her that she cannot go out on the street with this. She could also go out on the street if she has on top of it a jacket, a coat, a sweater, something. It should cover up the red t-shirt. But she cannot go out with a t-shirt on the street. Now, although in Shal Shivas Mishnah Luchas Chelik Yud Bais Simeshin Yud Gimel writes that you cannot wear red clothing even in your house, because he says if the time of B'chikasayim L'Salechu, if the reason is because you shouldn't go like the Goyim are going, are we permitted to wear non-Jewish clothing, Goyish clothing in the house? It's also Osir. And he says it's Pashat. And also for the other reason why we don't wear red, because it's a big deshachatz and we have to be bachno. So he asks, is a person permitted to wear red in his house? In the house he doesn't have to have bachno. So he writes that even in the house you should not wear red clothing. But in this case, I said for the shlucha she could have her daughter wear the t-shirt in the house, because after all, not all the poskim bring down this, that also in the house it is a problem. And over here, in such a case, because if everybody, all the Yaldei Ashluchas will have a t-shirt, and she won't have, it will be a big problem. It will be, damage her self-esteem or whatever it should be. And it's not a clear-cut thing that it's also usher to wear red clothing in the house. So at least in such a case, it's called the Shasat Chag. I told her that at home she could wear it, but she shouldn't go out on the street, only when she covers it. But it is very kedai that the Vada Kinnas should make an effort, even on the tiny protum, that it shouldn't happen, that t-shirt should be red. I heard that most of them weren't red, they were pink, but some were red. And we have to be, things which has to do with Chinuch Yisrael, Chinuch B'nois Yisrael, we have to be very, very careful that to have in mind, like we know the Rebbe was makpid on everything which they gave out, any booklet which they gave out for children, it should be according to Halacha and according to Yiddishkeit, especially when it comes to Nyun Tznias, which the Rebbe writes that this is one of the major foundations of Yiddishkeit, as it says, walk modestly with your God, which the Rebbe said that it emphasized that tznius is one of the yisoides of Jewish women. We have to be careful that it shouldn't happen again, that the t-shirt from the kinnas should be red, or even some should be red. Question. Chamishose B'Shvat, last week, I wanted to make a berches shechayonu on a fruit which called pomela. And one of the family members told me that you cannot make a bracha, a shechayonu on it, because it is a pre-mirkav. It's a hybrid. So therefore, you shouldn't make a shechayonu. Is it true or not? Min ha-Torah, there is a iser, you cannot be markev trees min b'shayne minoi. You could be make a harkova orange with oranges, but you cannot take from one kind of tree and be markev with eine minoi. And if a person does it, it's over for iser deraisa. But the halacha is that if a person did it and it came out a fruit which is basically a hybrid from two kinds of fruits, although you did a iser, the fruit is mutter to eat. It doesn't get also to eat. And in Chivas Halachas Ketanas Chelik Aleph Sima Samach, and also he repeats himself also in Sima Reish Samach Hai, he writes that you should not make a bracha on a fruit which is a hybrid from mi mishayne minoi, because since it was made be'isr and it was made against the roots of Hashem Yisborach, so how could you say shechiyanu when you see it and when you eat it when something was made against the roots of Hashem? Now he says, although it's permitted to eat, that's exactly sakosif that you could eat it, but make a shechiyanu, it's not mutter, and you cannot make a shechayonu on any fruit which is hybrid. The Yavatz and his Shivas, Shilas Yavatz, Chaylik Aleph, Simas Amach Gimel, asks on the Haluchas Ketanas a lot of questions, and he paskens that we are permitted to make a shechayonu on a fruit which came out from an iser of hybriding min b'shayne minoi. And the poskim have a lot of discussions, and I would say most of the poskim paskin like the Yavetz, that you could make a shechayonu on a fruit which is a hybrid fruit, even though it was made be'isr. And in the Chesed Lavruam, he writes that minig Yerushalayim is to make a shechayonu on a hybrid fruit, and that's the minig. So we have a machlokes, the Halachas Ketanas holds that you should not make a bracha, and the Yavetz writes you could make, in most of the poskim say that you could make a bracha. But that's if it is a fruit which came out directly from a hybrid tree. It's not nagai this whole machloikas, because by us, all the fruits we have does not come out from harkuvas trees one to each other. We have already the fruit which came out from other fruit, from the seeds from other fruit, and that's the chaladayas. All the poskim agree, even the Haluchas Ketanas, that if you have a fruit which is a hybrid fruit, and you take the seeds and you plant it, and it grows new fruit, the chaladayas, it's not a problem to make a shechiyanu. So all the pomelas and all the kiwis and all the fruits which we have are not the original fruit which came out from the tree which was hybrided. So therefore, we have no problem and no issue to make a shechiyanu on all these fruits, which is mirkoven. Question. Many commercial ovens turn off when opening the door. My question is, if a Yid turns on the fire and preheats the oven, then the goy opens the oven and puts in the food and closes it. He effectively turned the heating element back on. Would it still be considered Bishul Yisrael? Would it be the same for Pas Yisrael? Now this is a shmiz in the Poiskim. Some Poiskim say it is still Bishul Yisrael. Some Poiskim will say it's not Bishul Yisrael. In Shal Shivas Chaya Laivi Chelik Vov Siman Kif Yidalet, he says that if it is not in a commercial house, if it is in a private house, then we could be more lenient, because then we have the Shittas HaPoiskim, Shittas HaRamu, which says that if the oven did not cool off, it did not pass 24 hours from when it was shut off, that means it's not cooled off. We're talking about then, which took at least a day, it should cool off. So if it's still hot, it is still considered Bishul Yisrael. But not all the Poiskim agree, and Paskin at least, with the Ramu. We are machbar that it's not enough. But he says, the Chaya Laivi, if it's in the person's house, we have still another tziruf that some shittas Poiskim say that in a person's house, it's almost impossible that one of the Jewish members of the house opened up for himself the oven and did something also in the fire or in the food. So therefore, we have a tziruf, Shitta Saramu, and the other Shitta, which says that one of the family members did something in the fire. So therefore, we can be more lenient. And this is also how Harav Gelber, which is the Mechaber of Orche Shabbos and other Svarim, he writes in an article in Kovet Zoyar Gillian Vov that you could be lenient, and it brings down that Eliashiv was also maskim to him. He asked someone to ask Harav Eliashiv. But le'imazeh, there's a lot of other poiskim, Levisha Ois, from the Bezil Oibach, and other poiskim, which say clearly it's not considered Bishul Yisrael. And it's interesting to know that in Sefer Kerem Ephraim, Umet Chov writes that he himself went over to Harav Eliashiv and asked him, and he says, you cannot be lenient. Only if third of the bishul, it's already cooked a third. It's Kamacha ben Resua. So we have over here at least a machloikas in the Das Harav Eliashiv. In any case, it is not kedai to be Michael in such a case. Only if it is already cooked a third Kamacha ben Resua, or Letzoirich Gudel, you could be lenient. So to answer your question, if it's in a yeshiva, you should not be Michael in such a case, only if it's a Tzorech Gudel, or it was cooked already a third. If it's in the house, you could be a little bit more lenient, because you have another siddur also of that is probably one of the family members opened the oven and closed it again, so it's still Bishul Yisrael. Question. Where do all the surrounding yeshiva fees fall into? Trip fees, book fees, Tzivos Hashem fees. Adding up all all they could amount to a significant sum of money, can they be paid using Muas Maser? And the answer is no. Whenever you get something from paying something, you cannot pay it from Muas Maser. You cannot buy books from Maser. As we spoke already this subject. Once upon a time they were more lenient, but only if you you lend it for other people. But books in school, book fee or a trip fee, which you get something out of it. You get something out of it because you're getting books, you're getting a trip, so you cannot pay it from Maser. Question: If there is is there a shala if girls' production costumes is a vest of 4 corners made out of flimsy materials? Is it a problem that it doesn't have tzitzis? Again, girls dressing a vest which has 4 corners and it doesn't have tzitzis. And the answer is no, it's not a problem. Women could wear clothing which have 4 corners and they don't have to put on tzitzis, because we know they are potter mitzvah tzitzis. And if they are potter for mitzvah tzitzis, that means they don't have to put on tzitzis on a baguette, on clothing which has 4 corners. Men are machiyef to put on tzitzis. And if they're not putting on tzitzis on a baguette which has 4 corners, they're not over of a loisese, they are over a mitzvah's esse. There is a mitzvah's esse that you have to put on tzitzis on the 4 corners. But it's not a loisese. That's men. Women do not have this mitzvah's esse. So if woman does not have this mitzvah esse, they have no issue of wearing clothing which has 4 corners and it does not have tzitzis. Thank you for joining us, and please join us again next week. Send any questions to inbox@Anash.org. Good night and have a wonderful week.